Ever leaned over the kitchen counter at midnight, squeezing a plastic bottle of mayonnaise onto a ham's toasty, and wondered why it never seems to go off? You leave it in the cupboard for months, bake it under the summer sun at a barbecue, and it still comes out of the nozzle looking exactly the same glossy, blinding white. We've been conditioned to think this is just modern convenience. But have you ever actually stopped to look at what's keeping that emulsion alive? It is a household habit we consider completely normal, yet the reality is enough to make you freeze over your sandwich. When did a beautiful traditional sauce turn into an industrial lubricant? By the time you finish this video, you will know exactly what separates a proper condiment from literal chemistry. And you'll know more than 90% of shoppers pushing their trolleys down the aisle this weekend. I will show you how the big brands use clever engineering to sell you cheap fillers at premium prices. We will break down the exact substances that are quietly stabilizing your Friday night chippy sauce, and you'll find out why a fancy glass jar doesn't mean a thing. Stick around, because the most shocking revelation of all, the one that proves the multi-million-pound marketing campaigns are a total con, comes right near the end. Before we name the specific culprits sitting in your fridge right now, we need to lay down some basic groundwork. Proper mayonnaise is one of the simplest, most elegant culinary creations on earth. It requires just 5 basic elements: oil, egg yolk, a splash of vinegar or lemon juice, a touch of mustard, and a pinch of salt. That is it. It's an emulsion, which means you are forcing tiny droplets of oil to suspend themselves in a tiny amount of liquid, using the natural lecithin in the egg yolk as a bridge. People have been whisking this up by hand in ordinary bowls for over a century. It is a delicate balance of fat and acid, designed to be eaten fresh. So how did we end up with jars on British supermarket shelves that look like a laboratory manifest? The massive industrial food corporations had a massive problem. Real food goes off, and real ingredients cost money. To maximize profits and ensure a jar can sit on a supermarket shelf for a year without splitting into a greasy puddle, the industry had to re-engineer the recipe. They realized they could slash the amount of expensive ingredients, like quality egg yolks, and replace them with cheap, heavily processed alternatives. Think of it like buying a premium British steak pie, only to find out the filling is 90% thickened gravy and potato starch, with a few shreds of beef floating around. To keep this watered-down mixture from separating into a watery mess, the factories deploy heavy-duty stabilizers. They throw in modified starches, thickeners like xanthan gum, and industrial antioxidants. These aren't there to make it taste good. They are there to make a dead product behave like a fresh one. Every time you buy into these formulas, you are paying for clever physics rather than genuine food. The worst part is how the law lets them get away with it. In some parts of the world, there are incredibly strict legal definitions of what can actually be called mayonnaise based on egg content. In the UK, however, the word on the label is doing an absolute mountain of heavy lifting. The big brands use beautiful rustic fonts, pictures of happy free-range chickens, and words like real or traditional to bypass your brain and trigger nostalgia. They want you to think of your grand's kitchen while they pump the jar full of cheap seed oils and industrial stabilizers. You are not buying a premium condiment. You are buying a beautifully marketed illusion. Let's get stuck into the Hall of Shame, counting down from the standard culprits to the ultimate household betrayal. Number 7 is Hellmann's Real Mayonnaise. This is the absolute titan of the British condiment world, the jar that has lived in the door of almost every fridge in the UK for generations. It feels as comfortably British as a rainy bank holiday, even though it's owned by a massive multinational conglomerate. Because it proudly calls itself Real Mayonnaise in big, confident letters, you would naturally assume the jar is packed with rich egg and top-tier ingredients. The reality, according to data from Unilever Food Solutions, is a bit of a slap in the face. The recipe is roughly 78% rapeseed oil. That is nearly 4/5 of the entire jar made up of highly processed seed oil. The free-range egg they boast about on the telly? That sits right down at less than 9%. So that rich, creamy spread you are putting on your chips is mostly just a massive wall of rapeseed oil with a tiny splash of egg whipped through it. When you look closer at the label, you find spirit vinegar, sugar, salt, mysterious flavorings, and an antioxidant called calcium disodium EDTA. That last chemical is there for one reason: to keep that massive volume of oil stable so it doesn't go rancid on the shelf. It is a far cry from what anyone visualizes when they think of real food. And here is the kicker. In a recent independent blind taste test conducted with ordinary British consumers, Hellmann's didn't even win. Tasters who didn't know what brand they were eating complained that it lacked a proper, sharp tang. You are paying a premium price for a legendary name, but when you strip the branding away, the actual product leaves people completely flat. The logo is doing all the heavy lifting while your wallet takes the hit. Next up at number 6 is Heinz Seriously Good Mayonnaise. You have to admire the sheer, unadulterated cheek of putting your own 5-star review right there in the product name. It's a masterful piece of marketing, but unfortunately, your taste buds didn't get the memo. In that exact same independent consumer blind taste test, this famously confident jar crashed and burned, landing right near the bottom of the pile. The most common complaint from regular shoppers was that it simply had no flavor. It was a blank, bland wall of grease. Heinz isn't some cozy British heritage brand. It is managed by a colossal global entity driven by quarterly targets and shareholder margins. When a recipe gets scaled up to an international level, every single micro penny matters. Corporate accountants look at ingredients not as flavors, but as expenses to be managed. The gap between the warm, trustworthy brand your granddad bought and the actual emulsion rolling off the factory assembly line today quietly widens every year. They haven't announced a recipe downgrade because they don't have to. They just adjust the margins, tweak the processing, and rely on you blindly grabbing the familiar label from the Tesco shelf out of pure habit. When a product has to scream that it is seriously good on the front, it is usually because the back of the jar tells a very different story if you already feel like walking over to your kitchen cupboard to check your own jars. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the corporate corner cutting gets significantly worse from here. Number 5 brings us to Hellmann's Lighter Than Light. This product is a masterclass in psychological warfare aimed directly at the British shopper. You are trying to do the right thing, you are watching the waistline, and you feel a bit guilty about having a proper sandwich, so you reach for the bright blue label and feel incredibly virtuous. But if you flip that jar around and read the ingredients list in order of weight, you will see a brilliant magic trick. In standard mayonnaise, oil is the first ingredient. In this jar, the number 1 ingredient is plain, ordinary water. Water costs virtually nothing, yet they are selling it to you at a premium. Because water doesn't naturally spread like a rich condiment, they have to force it to behave. They pump it full of modified maize starch, spirit vinegar, egg, sugar, and thickeners like xanthan gum and gar gum. They have removed the expensive component, filled the jar with tap water, stabilized it with industrial starches and gums to mimic a creamy texture, and marketed it as a premium health choice. It is brilliant business for them, but a total ripoff for you. Light does not mean better. It usually just means watered down and propped up with fillers. A small dollop of real honest food is infinitely better than spreading a spoonful of chemically thickened water onto your sourdough. At number 4, we have Tesco Essentials Mayonnaise. I have massive sympathy for how this ends up in the trolley. The cost of living in Britain has gone through the roof. The weekly shop feels like a luxury excursion, and when you see a massive white tub for a fraction of the price of the big names, it makes total sense to grab it. But this is exactly where our core question gets incredibly sharp. At what point does it stop being mayonnaise at all? Budget lines like this function by completely flipping the traditional recipe on its head. The elements that actually make mayonnaise what it is, the oil and the egg, are squeezed down to the absolute bare minimum allowed by corporate lawyers. The cheap fillers, namely water and modified cornstarch, climb right to the top of the list. You are left with a white substance that looks correct and sits in a tub, but structurally it is a thickened imitation. If you have ever used this to make a classic potato salad for a family barbecue, only to watch it weep a sad, watery puddle into the bottom of the bowl after an hour, now you know why. There simply wasn't enough real fat or egg in there to hold the structure together. The people buying these budget options are the ones who can least afford to be short-changed, yet they are being handed an industrial illusion. Number 3 is Marks & Spencer Classic Mayonnaise, and this one is all about the classic British snobbery tax. M&S has spent over a century positioning itself as the ultimate high street indulgence. The green baskets, the beautiful lighting, the soft music, it all tells you that you are buying the absolute finest quality. You would naturally expect their classic mayonnaise to be an absolute dream on the spoon. Except, when the fancy label was hidden in that independent blind taste test, the illusion completely shattered. The M&S Classic plummeted down the rankings, finishing right alongside the cheap corporate formulas. The overwhelming consensus from the testers was that it was incredibly harsh, overly acidic, and tasted overwhelmingly of cheap vinegar. It completely lacked the smooth, balanced creaminess you expect from a premium brand. It proves that a beautiful logo and an upmarket reputation cannot alter basic kitchen chemistry. A high price tag doesn't mean they use better oils. It often just means you are funding a nicer storefront and a prettier glass jar. They are using heavy acidity to mask a thoroughly mediocre, cost-cut base, hoping the prestige of the carrier bag will trick your brain into enjoying it. Coming in at number 2 is Mayo mayonnaise. This is the sophisticated, continental option. It comes in an elegant glass jar with gold lettering, evoking images of old-world Parisian bistros and gourmet craft. You put it on the table when you have guests over because it makes you look cultured. It is priced as a luxury item, sitting comfortably above the standard supermarket condiments. But you must be a cynical shopper, not a trusting one. If you completely ignore the romantic French story on the front and read the tiny print on the back, you will find that the ingredients are remarkably ordinary. The elegant glass is hiding a formula that isn't a million miles away from the basic supermarket options down on the bottom shelf. The high price tag isn't paying for small batch culinary mastery, it is paying for the marketing illusion of luxury. The premium image is specifically engineered to stop you from checking the back. It whispers that you can trust the gold foil, but that is exactly when you need to read the label closest. If a brand wants you to pay a serious premium, the raw ingredients must justify it. Don't let a fancy foreign name do your thinking for you. Finally, at number 1, the absolute worst offender on our list. Crucial's mayonnaise, specifically the massive 1-liter catering squeeze bottle. You see these everywhere across the UK, perched on the counter of your local kebab shop, sitting in greasy spoons, and increasingly finding its way into household cupboards because people spot it in budget stores and think it's an incredible bargain. It is cheap, but it is built for an entirely different universe than actual cooking. Consider what this bottle is engineered to do. It has to sit out on a counter in a boiling hot takeaway for weeks on end, getting violently squeezed, exposed to air, and left at room temperature without ever splitting, separating, or growing anything dangerous. Real mayonnaise is a fragile, fresh creation made of egg that belongs straight in the fridge. To make a liquid survive that kind of industrial abuse, you have to completely abandon real food. This bottle is the absolute end of the road of industrial food modification. It is a shelf-stable, hyper-processed substance designed purely for survival and rock-bottom manufacturing costs. It is number 1 because it represents the ultimate death of the ingredient list. If a condiment has drifted that far from simple agriculture, it isn't food anymore. It is an industrial service. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. We have waded through the corporate sludge, the thickened water, and the marketing lies. So let's talk about the absolute winners, because you don't have to settle for industrial goop. There are brilliant options available right now that treat your body and your taste buds with respect. The first option is one that might surprise you, because the absolute best mayonnaise on the market isn't sitting on a supermarket shelf at all. It is the one you make yourself in your own kitchen. Before you roll your eyes and think it's too much of a faff, listen to how ridiculously simple this is. You can make real luxurious mayonnaise in exactly 15 seconds using a standard stick blender. All you do is get a tall, narrow jug. The one that came with your hand blender is perfect. Crack in 1 whole, fresh British egg. Add a single teaspoon of mustard, a generous squeeze of fresh lemon juice or white wine vinegar, and a proper pinch of sea salt. Then, pour a whole mug of oil right on top. If you want a beautifully clean profile, use a light olive oil or a pure avocado oil. Now, drop your stick blender straight down to the absolute bottom of the jug, press the power button, and hold it completely still. Don't move it an inch. For the first 5 seconds, you will watch a thick, snowy white cloud erupt at the bottom. Once that base forms, slowly draw the blender upwards through the oil. In 15 seconds flat, you have genuine, rich, velvety mayonnaise. There are no starches, no industrial gums, no chemical preservatives, and absolutely zero logo tax. It is cheaper than the premium jars, fresher than anything in a shop, and you are in total control of what goes onto your plate. If it ever runs a bit thin because you poured the oil too quickly, just whisk in an extra egg yolk to bring it back. Even if you don't eat eggs, you can swap the egg for the leftover water from a tin of chickpeas aquafaba, and it whips up into a stunning vegan version in exactly the same way. It is the absolute gold standard. But look, if you genuinely do not have the time or the desire to pull out a blender after a long shift, that is completely fair. The cleanest ready-made option you can buy in the UK is Hunter & Gather avocado oil mayonnaise. When you turn this jar around, the ingredient list is beautifully short. It contains avocado oil, British free-range egg yolk, apple cider vinegar, and a pinch of pink Himalayan salt. That is the entire list. There are no seed oils, no starches, no hidden sugars, and no weird chemical initialisms. It tastes incredibly rich, with a velvety texture that coats food properly instead of sliding off like the water-heavy alternatives. Now, let's be totally honest about the downside. It is expensive. This sits right at the top of the price scale, and there is no dodging that reality. It is a premium health choice rather than an economy buy. If you are someone who only uses a tiny scrape of mayo a week, but wants total peace of mind that you are eating pure food, this is your definitive pick. It is a luxury, but the cost is entirely justified by the quality of the fat inside. If you prefer a slightly more traditional, savory flavor profile, the exact same company makes Hunter & Gather olive oil mayonnaise. This swaps out the avocado oil for a high-quality olive oil base, maintaining that exact same uncompromising approach to pure ingredients. It completely avoids the cheap fillers and processed rapeseed oils that dominate the mainstream aisles. The taste has a lovely, slight pepperiness and a deep savory note that works incredibly well with cold meats or dolloped onto a jacket potato. Just like its sister product, it carries a heavy price tag, so it remains a treat-yourself item rather than something you dump into a massive family potato salad. But as an honest shelf-stable shortcut to homemade quality, it is exceptional. Now for a bit of a plot twist. Marks & Spencer was on our avoid list earlier, but we are judging individual products here, not corporate logos. While their classic jar is a disappointment, they also produce a product called the M&S only 6 ingredients olive oil mayonnaise. The name is completely transparent: olive oil, egg yolks, dried mustard, white wine vinegar, sea salt, and a splash of water. 6 things. That is a proper, recognizable kitchen recipe sitting right there on a standard high street shelf. It has a beautiful, clean texture, and none of that synthetic glossiness found in the industrial tubs. A quick word of warning so you don't get caught out. This praise applies strictly to this specific 6-ingredient jar. Do not walk down the rest of the M&S condiment aisle assuming everything else is pure, because many of their other sauces are still packed with the same cheap seed oils we are avoiding. At around £4.50 for a relatively small jar, it isn't cheap, but it proves that you can find clean food on the mainstream high street if you know exactly what to look for. Finally, the most accessible clean option for the everyday shopper is Dr. Will's avocado oil mayonnaise. What makes this one so fantastic is that it maintains a remarkably clean formula: avocado oil, free-range egg, and natural acidity, but it actually shows up on the shelves of mainstream supermarkets like Tesco. You don't have to hunt through specialist health shops or pay for expensive online deliveries to get it. It delivers a great, creamy texture without relying on xanthan gum or cornstarch. Always double-check the label when you grab it, as big companies love to tweak recipes without warning, but as a practical, convenient way to vote against industrial goop during your normal weekly shop, this is the one to aim for. To ensure you never get tricked by clever marketing departments again, here are the definitive rules for navigating the condiment aisle on your own. First, always look at the order of ingredients. If water or modified starch appears before the egg yolk, put the jar straight back on the shelf because you are being sold thickened tap water. Second, check the oil source. Prioritize jars built on olive oil or avocado oil and treat a high percentage of highly processed seed oils as a sign of corporate cost-cutting. Third, treat the words light or lighter as an immediate red flag, because pulling out natural fat always means they have packed the jar with starches and gums to fake the texture. Fourth, look for the word stabilizer or thickener on the back. Real mayonnaise holds its own structure through natural egg lecithin, so if a brand needs xanthan gum or gar gum, their emulsion is inherently weak. Fifth, look at the sugar content. Quality condiments do not need added sugar to taste good, so if it is high up the list, it is usually there to mask cheap, bitter ingredients. Finally, remember that the shorter the list, the better the food. If you need a degree in chemistry to read the back of a jar, it belongs in an engine bay, not on your plate. The entire industrial food system is built on a single premise: that you will look at the logo on the front of the packaging and completely ignore the truth printed on the back. Mayonnaise was designed to be a simple, glorious combination of 5 natural ingredients, but corporations turned it into a high-margin science experiment. The moment you shift your thinking from buying a brand name to buying an actual list of ingredients, you stop being a passive victim of clever supermarket marketing. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. If this investigation opened your eyes even a little bit, do me one last favor: smash that hype button and give the video a like. That simple click is the only way we push this message past the corporate algorithm and protect other ordinary shoppers from getting ripped off. Share this with a mate who practically drinks blue-labeled light mayo, and drop a comment below telling me exactly which brand is sitting in your fridge door right now. Let me know what supermarket product you want us to put under the microscopic lens next week. Until next time, keep your wits about you, read your labels, and protect your plate. Let's get stuck straight into the Hall of Shame, starting with the household giants and working our way down to the ultimate pantry betrayals. Number 7 is Hellmann's Real Mayonnaise. This is the undisputed leviathan of the British condiment landscape, the exact blue ribbon jar that has sat comfortably in the door of almost every single fridge in the United Kingdom for generations. For millions of people, this isn't just an option. It is the definitive benchmark of what the sauce is supposed to be. It feels as fundamentally woven into the fabric of British family life as a Sunday roast, even though it is actually owned by Unilever, a massive, faceless multinational conglomerate. Because it loudly and proudly prints the word real across the front in bold, confident lettering, you would naturally assume that the formula inside is packed with fresh, rich egg and premium components. The cold data from Unilever Food Solutions tells a completely different story. The actual recipe is roughly 78% rapeseed oil. That means nearly 4/5 of that entire jar is made up of highly processed seed oil. The free-range egg they boast about so aggressively on television adverts, that sits right down at less than 9% of the total weight. So, that rich, eggy spread you are putting into your lunchtime tuna sandwich is structurally just a massive pool of rapeseed oil with a tiny splash of egg whipped through it to turn it white. Tesco, when you peer closer at the microprint on the back, you discover spirit vinegar, sugar, salt, mysterious flavorings, and an industrial antioxidant called calcium disodium EDTA. That last chemical compound serves exactly one purpose. It acts as a synthetic anchor to keep that immense volume of oil chemically stable so it doesn't split or go rancid while sitting under harsh supermarket strip lighting. It is a long way from a traditional wholesome kitchen recipe. In a recent independent consumer blind taste test run by the consumer group Which, Hellmann's didn't even win. Tasters who couldn't see the famous blue ribbon openly complained that the sauce lacked a proper, sharp, vibrant tang. You are paying a massive premium for a legendary name, but when you strip the branding away, the substance itself leaves ordinary people entirely underwhelmed. The marketing department is doing all the work while your bank account takes the hit. Tesco next up at number 6 is Heinz Seriously Good Mayonnaise. You have to admire the raw, unadulterated hubris required to print your own 5-star product review directly on the front label. It is a magnificent piece of corporate engineering. But unfortunately, the taste buds of British shoppers didn't get the memo. In that exact same independent consumer blind taste test, this highly confident jar completely flopped, landing right near the bottom of the pile alongside the cheapest generic alternatives. The most frequent complaint from regular grocery shoppers was that it was utterly bland and completely lacked any defining flavor. It was just a thick wall of neutral grease. Heinz isn't a cozy British heritage brand managed by an old family business. It is part of a colossal global corporation driven entirely by quarterly targets and shareholder profit margins. When an original recipe gets scaled up to an international corporate level, every single micropenny matters to the balance sheet. Corporate food scientists look at raw ingredients not as flavor profiles, but as raw expenses to be aggressively optimized. The gap between the warm, trustworthy heritage name your family bought decades ago and the actual emulsion rolling off the modern assembly line quietly widens every year without any press releases. They haven't announced a recipe alteration because they don't have to. They just tweak the manufacturing specs, shorten the process, and count on you blindly grabbing the familiar bottle from the Tesco or Sainsbury's shelf out of pure, unthinking muscle memory. When a product has to scream that it is seriously good on the front, it is almost always because the text on the back reveals a thoroughly mediocre reality. If you already feel a sudden urge to walk over to your kitchen cupboard to check your own condiment bottles, hit that subscribe button right now, because the industrial corner cutting gets significantly harsher from here. Number 5 brings us to Hellmann's Lighter Than Light. This specific product is an absolute masterclass in psychological manipulation aimed squarely at the health-conscious British shopper. You are trying to do the sensible thing, you are watching your calorie intake, and you feel a bit guilty about having a proper bacon sandwich, so you reach for the bright blue cap and feel incredibly virtuous about your lifestyle choices. But if you flip that plastic bottle around and read the ingredients list in strict order of weight, you will witness an astonishing corporate magic trick. In standard mayonnaise, oil is the first and heaviest ingredient. In this specific formulation, the number one ingredient by a country mile is plain, ordinary water. Water costs virtually nothing to pump into a factory, yet they are selling it back to you at a premium price point per gram. Because plain water doesn't naturally spread like a rich, velvety condiment, they have to force it to behave against its nature. They pump the mixture full of modified maize starch, spirit vinegar, a tiny percentage of egg, sugar, and industrial thickeners like xanthan gum and gar gum. Think about what has actually occurred here. They have systematically removed the expensive component, filled the void with tap water, stabilized it with chemically altered starches to mimic a creamy mouthfeel, and marketed it as a premium wellness choice. It is fantastic business for their profit margins, but a total deception for your kitchen. Light does not mean better. It almost always just means watered down and propped up with industrial stabilizers. A single small dollop of real, honest, fat-dense food is infinitely more satisfying than spreading a massive tablespoon of chemically thickened water onto your toast. At number 4, we find Tesco Essentials Mayonnaise. I have a massive amount of genuine sympathy for why this exact tub ends up in so many shopping trolleys every single week. The cost of living across Britain has gone through the roof. The weekly supermarket run feels like a luxury excursion, and when you spot a massive white plastic tub for a tiny fraction of the price of the famous global brands, it makes complete practical sense to grab it. But this is precisely where our core question becomes incredibly sharp. At what point does it completely stop being mayonnaise at all? Budget lines like this function by entirely turning the traditional recipe upside down. The genuine elements that actually define the sauce, the oil and the egg, are squeezed down to the absolute bare legal minimum allowed by corporate regulations. The cheap industrial fillers, namely water and modified cornstarch, climb right to the absolute top of the ingredient list. You are left with a pale white substance that looks correct and sits in a tub, but structurally, it is just a thickened starch gel wearing the name of a condiment. If you have ever used this cheap budget stuff to make a classic potato salad for a family barbecue, only to watch it split into a sad, watery, translucent puddle at the bottom of the bowl after an hour in the garden, now you know exactly why. There simply wasn't enough real fat or high-quality egg yolk in there to hold the molecular structure together. The people buying these ultra-budget options are the ones who can least afford to be shortchanged, yet they are being handed an industrial illusion. Number 3 is Marks & Spencer Classic Mayonnaise. And this entry is all about the classic British snobbery tax. M&S has spent generations carefully positioning itself as the ultimate high street culinary indulgence. The clean green baskets, the pristine lighting, the soft classical music over the speakers. Everything about the retail experience is engineered to tell you that you are purchasing the absolute finest quality available. You would naturally expect their classic mayonnaise to be an absolute dream on the spoon, easily outclassing the basic options down the road at Asda or Morrison's except. When the fancy's upmarket label was hidden from view in that independent consumer blind taste test, the entire illusion completely shattered into pieces. The M&S Classic plummeted straight down the consumer rankings, finishing dead last alongside the cheapest factory formulas. The overwhelming consensus from the ordinary tasters was that the product was incredibly harsh, overly acidic, and tasted overwhelmingly of cheap, aggressive vinegar. It completely lacked the smooth, rounded, velvety creaminess you expect from a premium high street brand. It proves definitively that a beautiful logo and an upmarket reputation cannot alter basic kitchen biochemistry. A high price tag doesn't mean they sourced better ingredients. It often just means you are personally funding a nicer high street storefront and a prettier glass jar. They are using heavy acidity to mask a thoroughly uninspired, cost-cut base, hoping the prestige of the carrier bag will trick your brain into enjoying it. Coming in at number 2 is Mayo mayonnaise. This is the sophisticated, continental option on the shelf. It comes packaged in an elegant glass jar with traditional gold lettering, evoking images of old-world Parisian bistros, historic culinary craft, and high-end gourmet tradition. You put it out on the table when you have guests over because it makes you look cultured and discerning. It is priced strictly as a luxury item, sitting comfortably above the standard supermarket squeeze bottles. But you must learn to be a cynical, investigative shopper rather than a trusting one. If you completely ignore the romantic foreign story on the front panel and read the microscopic print on the back label, you will find that the actual ingredients are remarkably ordinary. The elegant glass structure is hiding a formula that isn't a million miles away from the basic supermarket own brand options sitting on the bottom shelf of any Morrison's or Sainsbury's. The high price tag isn't paying for small batch culinary mastery or rare, premium ingredients. It is paying exclusively for the marketing illusion of luxury. The premium image is specifically engineered to stop you from checking the facts. It whispers that you can trust the gold foil and the French name, but that is exactly the moment you need to read the text closest. If a brand wants you to hand over a serious premium, the raw ingredients must justify it on their own merits. Don't let a fancy foreign name do your thinking for you. Finally, at number 1, the absolute worst offender on our entire avoid list. Crucial's mayonnaise, specifically the massive 1-liter catering squeeze bottle. You see these giant plastic bottles everywhere across the UK, perched on the counter of your local late-night kebab shop, sitting in greasy spoon cafes, and increasingly finding its way into household cupboards because people spot it in budget clearance shops and think it's an incredible volume bargain. It is cheap, but it is built for an entirely different universe than actual human cooking. Consider what this giant bottle is engineered to do by its manufacturers. It has to sit out on a counter in a boiling hot, greasy takeaway environment for weeks on end, getting violently squeezed, exposed to ambient air, and left at room temperature without ever splitting, separating, or growing anything dangerous. Real mayonnaise is a fragile, fresh creation made of raw egg that belongs straight in the fridge. To make a liquid emulsion survive that kind of industrial abuse, you have to completely abandon real food. This bottle is the absolute end of the road of industrial modification. It is a shelf-stable, hyper-processed substance designed purely for thermal survival and rock-bottom manufacturing costs. It sits at number 1 because it represents the ultimate death of the ingredient list. If a condiment has drifted that far from simple agriculture, it isn't food anymore. It is an industrial service. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. We have waded through the corporate sludge, the thickened water, and the marketing lies. So let's talk about the absolute winners. Because you don't have to settle for industrial goop. There are brilliant options available right now that treat your body and your taste buds with respect. Before we look at the store shelves, I promised you a twist, and here it is. Because this is the part that should genuinely wind you up in the best possible way. Remember that independent blind taste test I keep mentioning? Here's what really happened in it. When ordinary British people sat down and tasted these mayonnaises without seeing a single label, the winners weren't the famous global names at all. 2 of the cheapest supermarket-owned brands, the Co-op on the side mayonnaise and the Sainsbury's own label, came out right at the top. They beat the big, glossy, heavily advertised brands that cost considerably more. The famous logos lost to the humble-owned brands, and the tasters had no idea which was which. A huge chunk of what you pay for a famous name mayonnaise isn't the substance inside. It is the advertising, the tele campaigns, and the fancy branding. You are paying a logo tax. That test proved that ordinary people, given a fair blind choice, often prefer the cheap own brand option anyway. It exposes the reality that the expensive ones aren't special. You are being charged a premium for a name, not for a better jar. But if you want the absolute gold standard of nutrition and flavor, the best mayonnaise of all isn't on a commercial shelf at all. It is the one you make yourself. And before you switch off and think that's too much of a faff, please hear me out. This is genuinely one of the easiest things you will ever make in your own kitchen, and once you've done it once, you'll wonder why you ever handed over cash for the jarred stuff. Here is all you do. Take a tall, narrow jug or beaker, the exact kind that a standard stick blender comes with. Crack in 1 whole free-range egg, add a single teaspoon of mustard, a good squeeze of fresh lemon juice or a splash of white wine vinegar, and a proper pinch of salt. Then pour in your oil, around a standard mug's worth. Use a light olive oil, or if you want an even cleaner option, a cold-pressed avocado oil. Now, drop your stick blender right down to the very bottom of the jug, switch it on, and hold it dead still for a few seconds. Do not lift it. You will see it turn thick, pale, and creamy right before your eyes at the base. Then slowly and gently lift the blender up through the mixture as it pulls the rest of the oil down into the vortex. 10 to 15 seconds, and that is it. You have made real luxurious mayonnaise. There is no modified starch, no gum, no mystery chemicals, and no logo tax. Just 5 honest things and about half a minute of your life. If it ever looks a touch thin because you lifted the blender too fast, you can rescue the whole thing by blending in 1 more egg yolk. If you don't eat eggs, there is an equally simple version using the water from a tin of chickpeas, which whips up beautifully in exactly the same way. It is fresher than anything in the shop, and you control every single gram of fat that goes into it. Second, if you genuinely do not have the time or the inclination to make your own, and that is completely fair, the cleanest jar I can point you to on British shelves is Hunter & Gather's avocado oil mayonnaise. Turn it over, and the label is almost startlingly short. It is made with 100% avocado oil, British free-range egg yolk, apple cider vinegar, and a pinch of pink Himalayan salt. That is it. There are no seed oils, no starches, no gums, no added sugar, and no synthetic preservatives with initials after their name. It is just about the closest thing to homemade quality inside a retail jar. It feels incredibly decadent in the mouth, with a smooth texture that clings to food perfectly instead of looking watery. Now, I have to be honest with you about the catch, because there always is one. It is not cheap. A small jar costs around £4, making it comfortably one of the pricier choices on the shelf. I won't pretend it's a budget answer, because it isn't. Think of it as the clean pick rather than the economy pick. If you want a ready-made mayonnaise with a genuinely honest ingredient list, and you are willing to pay a bit extra for that peace of mind, this is the definitive choice. For an everyday casual squeeze, it might feel like an absolute luxury, but on the quality of what is actually inside the glass, it is very hard to beat. Tesco third. From the very same people, there is Hunter & Gather's olive oil mayonnaise, and it earns its place on our list for the exact same honest reasons. It is built entirely on a 100% olive oil base instead of avocado, with that same refreshingly short ingredient list and absolutely none of the industrial gums, starches, or seed oils we have been calling out all the way through this video. If you prefer the slightly richer, more classic Mediterranean note that a good olive oil brings to a salad or a piece of cold chicken, this is the one to reach for. It carries a similar premium price of £4 for a small jar, so the same honest warning applies. This is a treat-yourself jar rather than an everyday economy choice for a massive family. But as a clean, simple, ready-made option created by people who clearly care about keeping a recipe close to its historic natural origins, it is a thoroughly solid choice and a world away from the industrial tubs surrounding it. Fourth, and yes, I know what you are thinking, because Marks & Spencer was on our avoid list just a few minutes ago, and that is exactly the point I want to make. We are not judging companies here, we are judging individual jars. The Marks & Spencer Classic Mayonnaise let us down in the flavor department, but M&S also makes something called the only 6 ingredients olive oil mayonnaise, and that is a genuinely different story. The clue is right there in the name. It contains olive oil, egg yolks, dried mustard, white wine vinegar, sea salt, and water. 6 things. That is a proper, honest, recognizable kitchen recipe, and it is sitting right there in a mainstream high street shop. It has a beautiful, clean texture and none of that synthetic glossiness. A quick word of caution so nobody catches me out. This is praise for this exact jar, not a gold star for the entire supermarket across the board, because plenty of their other sauces still lean heavily on the very seed oils we have spent this video avoiding. So, buy the 6-ingredient one by name and don't assume the rest of the aisle is the same. It isn't the cheapest jar on the shelf either, coming in at around £4.50, so it sits firmly in the premium bracket, but it proves that clean. Simple mayonnaise can absolutely be found on an ordinary British high street, if you know exactly what to look for. Fifth, the one I would call the most accessible clean pick of the lot for the average supermarket run is Dr. Will's Avocado Oil Mayonnaise. The reason I like this one so much for ordinary shoppers is that it keeps strictly to that same short, honest formula. It is made with an avocado oil base, free-range egg yolk, apple vinegar, lemon juice, and a bit of mustard and pepper, completely without the industrial gums and heavy starches. And crucially, it turns up directly on the shelves of mainstream supermarkets like Tesco for around £4. That accessibility matters enormously. A clean mayonnaise is only any use to you if you can actually get hold of it during a normal weekly shop without hunting through specialist health food stores or paying for expensive online delivery. It delivers a fantastic flavor without any added sugar hit. Do double-check the current label when you pick it up, because factory recipes can change without warning, but as a realistic, convenient way to vote with your wallet against industrial fillers. This is the one I would point most people towards first. To ensure you never get tricked by clever factory marketing departments ever again, here are the definitive, rock-solid rules for navigating the condiment aisle completely on your own terms. First, always look at the strict structural order of ingredients on the back panel. If plain water or modified maize starch appears anywhere before the actual egg yolk, put the jar straight back onto the shelf because you are being sold a chemically thickened liquid gel instead of a genuine condiment. Second, check the exact oil source being utilized. Prioritize premium jars explicitly built on an olive oil or cold-pressed avocado oil base, and treat a massive percentage of highly processed seed oils like standard rapeseed as a clear indicator of corporate cost-cutting at your expense. Third, treat the words light, lighter, or lighter than light as an immediate psychological red flag, because pulling out the natural fat always means the food scientists had to pack the jar with starches, corn syrup, and industrial gums just to fake the creamy mouthfeel your tongue expects. Fourth, actively look for the specific word stabilizer or thickener on the reverse label. Real mayonnaise holds its own molecular structure effortlessly through natural egg lecithin, so if a brand needs to inject xanthan gum, gar gum, or carrageenan, it means their emulsion is inherently weak and watered down. Fifth, look closely at the sugar content in the nutritional table. Quality condiments do not need added sugar to taste rich or satisfying, so if sugar or glucose-fructose syrup is climbing high up the list, it is usually there to mask cheap, bitter, highly processed components. Finally, remember the absolute golden rule of the grocery shop. The shorter the ingredient list is, the better the food inside will be. If you genuinely need a formal degree in industrial chemistry just to read the back of a jar during your weekly trip to Morrison's or Asda, that substance belongs in an engine bay. Not inside your body. The entire industrial mass-market food system is built upon a single, incredibly cynical premise: that you will look at the gorgeous heritage logo on the front of the packaging and completely ignore the stark truth printed in tiny type on the back. Mayonnaise was designed over a century ago to be a simple, glorious, nourishing combination of 5 natural kitchen elements, but massive multinational corporations systematically turned it into a high-margin, shelf-stable science experiment. The exact moment you shift your daily thinking from buying a famous brand name to buying an actual list of genuine ingredients, you permanently stop being a passive, unthinking victim of clever supermarket marketing strategies. Thank you so much for investing your valuable time with me today. If this deep dive investigation opened your eyes even a little bit to what is happening behind the factory gates, do me one last massive favor before you close the app. Smash that hype button right now and give this video a proper like. That simple, immediate click is the single biggest way we push this independent message straight past the corporate algorithm and out to the regular people who desperately need to hear it. Share this video immediately with a mate or a family member who practically drinks those blue-labeled light mayonnaise varieties because they think they are being healthy. And drop a specific comment below telling me exactly which of these brands is sitting inside your own fridge door right this second. Let me know exactly which everyday supermarket food or household product you want us to put under our microscopic lens next week, because your comments are genuinely how I choose our next target. Until next time, keep your wits completely about you, read your labels with a cynical eye, and protect your plate.